What if your pain isn't a mistake? What if it's not some cosmic glitch to be fixed, medicated, or avoided, but a calling? This is not a comfortable question. Most people spend their entire lives running from it, and I don't blame them. Pain feels like a violation. It interrupts our plans, shatters our expectations, and exposes how fragile we really are. But if you've come to this video hoping to escape your pain, I'll be honest with you. I won't offer a way out. What I can offer is a way through. Because here's the truth. Pain is not meaningless. The ache in your chest, the frustration in your soul, the silent heaviness that no one else sees, it might just be your soul's way of asking you to wake up. Too many of us treat suffering like a glitch in the system. We want to suppress it, explain it away, or drown it in distractions. But what if pain is part of the design? What if it's not a sign that something's gone wrong, but that something important is trying to emerge? This idea isn't popular. Our culture teaches us that life should be comfortable, that pleasure is the goal, and that any form of suffering is a failure. But the wisdom of the ages teaches something entirely different. St. Thomas Aquinas, the great realist philosopher, believed that pain has a place in the order of things. He saw it not as punishment, but as purification, a way the soul is stretched, deepened, and made capable of receiving truth. So here's the invitation. Don't turn away from your pain just yet. Look at it. Sit with it. Ask it what it's trying to show you. Because maybe your suffering isn't trying to destroy you. Maybe it's trying to shape you. And if that idea stirs something in you, if you've ever felt that your wounds might carry meaning beyond themselves, then stay with me. This journey won't offer shortcuts, but it will offer something better. Clarity, honesty, and a vision of life where even your deepest pain has purpose. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, what kind of pain have you been tempted to silence or dismiss lately? Let's talk about it, because you're not alone. And maybe that's the first thing pain is trying to teach us. Look around. Pain is everywhere, but almost nowhere is it welcomed. In today's world, we've mastered the art of avoiding suffering. We don't feel, we scroll. We don't face reality, we medicate it. We chase noise, pleasure, and productivity, not because we're thriving, but because we're terrified of being still long enough to feel what's really going on inside. Think about it. When was the last time you truly sat with your pain without trying to escape it? We live in a culture that treats suffering like a glitch in the algorithm, something to be patched, ignored, or outsourced. And so we build entire lifestyles around avoiding discomfort. We call it coping. But most of our coping isn't healing, it's hiding. We bury ourselves in work, hoping achievement will numb the ache. We binge entertainment, trying to drown the silence with stimulation. We depend on substances, alcohol, drugs, even food, not to celebrate life, but to dull its sharp edges. But there's a cost to all this avoidance. When we push pain away, we push away the part of us that's asking the most important questions. What am I missing? Where have I strayed? What truly matters? Pain, though brutal, is honest. And when we silence it, we lose touch with truth itself. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz, wrote that despair is suffering without meaning. But what we've created today is something even worse. Numbness without meaning. We no longer suffer consciously. We suffer unconsciously, passively, without reflection, without direction. We end up empty, exhausted, and strangely untouched by the very wounds that could have healed us. The ancients were wiser. They didn't glamorize pain, but they respected it. They knew that some truths can only be found through darkness, that the soul, like the body, grows through resistance, and that running from pain only increases its power over us. So what if we stopped treating suffering as an enemy to eliminate, and started treating it as a message to interpret? What if, instead of silencing the pain, we listened to it? Ask yourself, what have I been using to anesthetize my suffering? What distractions have I baptized as normal when they're really shields against feeling? This isn't about shame, it's about awareness. Because awareness is where healing begins. And healing, real healing, only starts when we stop running. Suffering rarely shouts. More often it whispers. It seeps into your mornings as a strange heaviness. It lingers in your thoughts as a quiet discontent. It shows up in your sleep, your relationships, your moments of stillness, when all the noise fades and something deeper begins to ache. Most people miss this. They think suffering is only valid when it's dramatic, when it's visible. But the most dangerous pain is often the kind that hides. The one you don't talk about, the one you don't fully understand, the one you've learned to carry like it's just part of who you are. But here's something few are told. Suffering speaks. It has a language, even when it doesn't use words. And that language always points inward, to something in you that is not aligned, not whole, not yet fully honest. Maybe your suffering is pointing to an illusion you've been clinging to, a false belief about who you are or what you need to be happy. Maybe it's revealing a fracture between what you value and how you live. Maybe it's exposing a dependency, a wound, a fear you've never dared to face. Pain doesn't lie. It may not always tell you the whole truth, but it always tells you something true. Philosopher Julian Marias once said that the human being is not just someone who suffers, but someone who knows he suffers, and therefore can question, interpret, and transcend that suffering. That's the turning point, when pain ceases to be a wall and becomes a mirror. But mirrors are uncomfortable, they force us to look, and we don't always like what we see. That's why people turn away. But turning away doesn't make the truth disappear. It only drives it deeper into the shadows where it festers, repeating itself in different forms: anxiety, bitterness, apathy. So here's the shift. What if, instead of asking, "How do I get rid of this pain?" you asked, "What is this pain trying to tell me?" That question changes everything. It invites you into dialogue with your suffering. And in that dialogue, the soul begins to speak. Not in panic, but in clarity. Take a moment. Sit quietly and ask, what part of me is crying out? What truth have I avoided hearing? Your pain knows. The question is, are you willing to listen? In today's world, we've been sold a dangerous idea that suffering has no value, that it's just a detour, a glitch, something to be eliminated as quickly as possible. We're told to move on, get over it, stay positive. And if the pain persists, we're made to feel defective. This illusion is everywhere. It seeps into therapy sessions that promise instant relief, self-help books that oversimplify the human soul, and social media feeds that celebrate polished lives while hiding the private storms behind them. Pain doesn't photograph well, so it gets erased, or worse, mocked. But let's get honest. Has this mindset helped anyone heal? Or has it simply made people more isolated in their suffering, more ashamed of their wounds, more desperate for a fix that never arrives? When we believe that suffering is useless, we also believe that we are failing when we hurt. That is a lie. Pain is not proof of failure. It's proof that you're alive, that you're sensitive to the deep fault lines of the world and of your own heart. And being sensitive is not a weakness, it's a starting point for wisdom. In classical philosophy, especially in the thought of St. Thomas Aquinas, the idea that pain is meaningless would have sounded absurd. Aquinas taught that suffering can be a path toward clarity, purification, and even sanctity, not because pain is good in itself, but because it breaks the illusions we cling to and forces us to confront what truly matters. But modern culture doesn't want clarity, it wants comfort. And so we discard emotions like we discard broken objects, quickly, thoughtlessly, as if discomfort had no value. We forget that pain often contains the seed of transformation if we're willing to sit with it. Here's the tragedy. When we treat suffering as useless, we treat those who suffer as burdens. We alienate ourselves from the very experiences that could bind us together in compassion and humility. So let me ask you, have you ever dismissed your pain because it didn't seem productive? Have you ever rushed yourself to feel better, just to avoid the discomfort of sitting with your own soul? Maybe it's time to reclaim suffering, not as something to worship, but as something to listen to. Because the moment you stop demanding that pain justify itself, is the moment it starts to reveal its deeper meaning. What if your suffering isn't just about you? What if the pain you feel is not meant to trap you in yourself, but to push you beyond yourself, to stretch your soul toward something greater? something truer. This is the quiet power of suffering. It strips us. It removes the masks, the performances, the illusions of control. It exposes who we are when there's nothing left to prove. And in that raw, unguarded place, something sacred can begin. Most people think suffering makes us smaller, but in truth it has the potential to do the opposite. It humbles the ego, yes, but in humbling us, it opens us to reality, to God, to the suffering of others. When you're in pain, you realize just how finite you are. You're reminded that you can't fix everything, that your strength is limited, that your happiness cannot rest on fleeting circumstances. And that's not despair. That's a doorway. Because the ego, when it meets its limits, finally has the chance to surrender. This is what Viktor Frankl understood so profoundly. He saw suffering not as something to be merely endured, but as a decisive moment, one that reveals whether we will collapse inward into bitterness or reach outward in search of meaning. He called this reaching transcendence, going beyond the self. In the Christian tradition, this path is clear. The cross isn't a symbol of defeat, but of transformation. Christ does not flee from suffering. He embraces it, transfigures it, and offers it back as love. This isn't abstract theology. It's a pattern written into the human soul, that to rise, we must first descend. But let's be honest, this kind of transcendence doesn't happen automatically. Pain alone does not purify. It must be accepted, reflected upon, lifted. The question is, what are you doing with your suffering? Are you using it to grow in compassion, wisdom, surrender? Or are you letting it harden you, isolate you, shrink you? The pain you carry today is not meaningless. It might be the exact pressure needed to crack open the shell of your self-preoccupation, revealing a deeper capacity for truth, for goodness, for love. So ask yourself, what might my pain be inviting me to let go of? What greater purpose might it be calling me to serve? Transcendence begins the moment we stop asking, why me? And start asking, what now? It's one thing to speak of suffering as a path to growth. It's another to witness it. Because when pain is not just theorized but lived, and lived well, it becomes undeniable. History is filled with souls who did not just survive suffering, but were transformed by it. And not because they were superhuman, but because they faced their pain with honesty, humility, and hope. Think of Fyodor Dostoevsky. Imprisoned, humiliated, and nearly executed, he emerged not crushed, but awakened. His suffering didn't make him bitter. It made him see. His novels, especially the brothers Karamazov and Crime and Punishment, drip with the insights of a man who stared into the abyss and came back with truth. He once wrote, "Suffering is the sole origin of consciousness." That's not despair, it's revelation. Or consider Edith Stein, Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross. A brilliant philosopher turned Carmelite nun, she walked into Auschwitz not with anger, but with peace. Her suffering became an offering. She had discovered what so many miss, that suffering united with love becomes redemptive. But it's not just saints and geniuses. Every day, ordinary people become extraordinary through pain. The single mother who quietly bears the weight of rejection yet chooses not to poison her children with bitterness. The man who loses everything but refuses to let despair define his dignity. The friend who sits with another's sorrow, simply because he remembers how it felt to be alone. These are not romantic stories, they're hard. They involve tears, nights of silence, and the temptation to give up. But what separates those who are transformed from those who are merely broken is not what they suffered. It's how they responded. Pain doesn't automatically elevate us, but when met with meaning, it refines us. Like fire, it can destroy or purify. Julian Marius once said that human greatness is not found in comfort but in fidelity to the demands of reality, and suffering is the great demand reality places on every soul. It asks, will you collapse or will you deepen? So pause. Think of someone whose suffering has inspired you. What did they teach you, not with words but with the way they carried their cross? These lives remind us, pain doesn't have the final word. Response does. And in that response, character is born. We like to believe we can outrun suffering, that if we stay busy enough, successful enough, distracted enough, the ache will fade. But pain doesn't disappear when ignored. It deepens. It hides. And when left unaddressed, it doesn't die. It metastasizes. You see this everywhere. People stuck in patterns they don't understand. The man who sabotages every relationship, not knowing he's still carrying wounds from childhood. The woman who numbs herself with work, never pausing to ask why rest feels threatening. The countless souls who bury their sorrow beneath sarcasm, addiction, or control, hoping if they don't name the pain, it won't consume them. But what we don't realize is that unacknowledged pain becomes the silent architect of our lives. It shapes how we love, how we trust, how we see the world, and slowly, subtly, it hardens the heart. When we run from suffering, we do more than avoid discomfort. We reject transformation. Because growth doesn't happen in comfort zones. It happens when we stay, when we listen, when we endure with open eyes and willing hearts. Viktor Frankl warned of this very danger. He observed that those who could not find meaning in their suffering would often descend into despair, aggression, or apathy. And that's what we see today. A culture addicted to escape, terrified of silence, starved of depth. But the price of this escape is steep. When we don't face our pain, we lose our capacity for empathy. We become cynical, suspicious, closed. We mock sincerity. We fear vulnerability. And slowly, we forget how to feel. St. Thomas Aquinas taught that the soul was made for truth, and truth often enters not through pleasure but through pressure. When we run from pain, we run from the very pressure that could open us to reality, to grace, to a life that is no longer about comfort but about communion. Ask yourself, what pain have I been refusing to face? How has that refusal shaped the way I live, the way I love, the way I see others? This isn't about self-blame. It's about self-recovery. Because healing begins the moment we stop running, the moment we turn around and say, I'm willing to feel this. I'm willing to learn. And in that moment, pain loses its power to enslave and begins its work of transformation. Suffering is inevitable. But what we do with it, that's where the difference lies. Two people can go through the same tragedy, and yet emerge from it in opposite directions. One bitter, the other wiser. One hardened, the other softened. The turning point is not the pain itself, it's the attitude with which we meet it. To suffer well is not to enjoy suffering. It is to suffer consciously, to stay awake in the midst of the storm. It means refusing to become a passive victim of your pain, and instead becoming an active participant in your own transformation. But how do we do this? How do we suffer well? First, acceptance. Not resignation, not defeat, but a courageous yes to what is. The first wound suffering inflicts is the loss of control. Most people fight this. They demand explanations, justice, certainty. But the soul only begins to grow when it stops resisting what it cannot change. Second, listening. Pain carries a message, but it doesn't scream, it whispers. You have to be still to hear it. What is your suffering pointing to? What desire, what illusion, what lie is it exposing? What longing is hidden underneath the ache? Third, offering. Suffering turns toxic when it closes in on itself. But when offered, when lifted for the sake of something greater, it becomes redemptive. This is why the saints speak of uniting suffering with love, not to glorify pain, but to give it direction. In Frankl's words, in some way suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. Meaning doesn't eliminate pain, but it transforms its quality. It gives it dignity. To suffer well is to allow pain to teach you. It's to stay vulnerable, even when everything in you wants to shut down. It's to ask, what kind of person is this pain inviting me to become? And to answer, not with theory, but with the way you show up, every day, every moment. This takes courage, not the loud kind, but the quiet interior strength of someone who refuses to give up on themselves, or on life. So ask yourself now, what would it look like for me to suffer well? What interior posture do I need to adopt, not to escape my pain, but to walk through it with integrity, with meaning, and with hope? Because how you suffer will shape who you become. Not all suffering destroys. Some suffering, when embraced with honesty and humility, purifies. It doesn't just leave a scar, it removes what never truly belonged in you to begin with. There is a kind of pain that strips you of illusion. It dismantles the lies you didn't even know you were living. It shows you that what you thought you needed, you didn't. That what you thought was strength was pride. That what you thought was love was possession or fear. This is not poetic. It's surgical. The pain that purifies is not gentle, but it is merciful. It doesn't flatter the ego. It reforms the soul. And when it finishes its work, what remains is not less of you, but more of the real you. St. John of the Cross called this the dark night of the soul. Not because God abandons us, but because our false lights are extinguished. The soul enters a space where comfort can no longer guide us. Only truth can. And truth is often revealed through loss. But here's the paradox. In that darkness, something new is born. A freedom from attachments that once enslaved us. A deeper clarity about what truly matters. A quiet strength that no longer depends on applause, control, or escape. Think of gold purified by fire. The heat does not create value, it reveals it. It burns away the dross. Suffering does the same. It removes the noise, the clutter, the idols we didn't know we were worshiping. Philosopher Joseph Pieper, in his Reflections on Virtue, wrote that true fortitude is not simply endurance, but the readiness to face suffering when it is necessary for the sake of the good. This is not masochism. It is moral vision. It is the refusal to be ruled by fear or self-protection. So ask yourself, what part of me is being purified through this pain? What attachments, what illusions, what lies are burning away? And even deeper, who am I becoming on the other side of this? When suffering is allowed to do its inner work, it doesn't just leave you wounded, it leaves you awakened. It realigns your soul with the essential, with what cannot be lost, with what does not die. And in that place, even pain becomes a gift. Not because it feels good, but because it makes you good. It makes you whole. It sets you free. No one seeks suffering. We avoid it instinctively. And yet, if you've walked with me this far, something in you knows the truth. Pain is not the enemy. We've been taught to see suffering as a detour, as a problem to solve or an experience to avoid. But what if it's not a detour at all? What if it's a path, a narrow, often dark, but deeply meaningful road toward becoming who we are truly meant to be? This doesn't mean we glorify pain. It means we stop running from it. We stop pretending that life can be lived fully without sacrifice, without sorrow, without wounds. Think of the great stories, the great souls, the lives that left a mark on the world. None of them were shaped by ease. They were forged in the furnace of trial, in nights of silence, in seasons of loss. But they emerged more human, not in spite of their pain, but because of how they lived through it. Viktor Frankl, who endured unspeakable suffering, did not come out of the camps with bitterness, but with conviction. He wrote that suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning, and he devoted his life to helping others find that meaning. St. Thomas Aquinas saw that our final end is not pleasure, but beatitude, the fullness of life in truth and love. And to reach that, the soul must be purified, tested, expanded. Suffering, when born with love and wisdom, becomes not a curse, but a cooperation with the deepest truths of reality. This is not abstract. It's personal. You, right now, are carrying something. A sorrow, a question, a weight. Maybe it doesn't make sense yet. Maybe it still feels cruel. But what if, instead of demanding that it go away, you asked, how might this pain shape me? How might it soften me? How might it awaken me? You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to fix everything overnight. But you can choose not to waste your suffering. You can choose to let it carve in you a deeper compassion, a stronger will, a freer heart. If this message spoke to something in you, don't keep it inside. Share in the comments. What has your pain taught you so far? And if you haven't found the lesson yet, that's okay. Just speak from where you are. Like, subscribe, and join us here. Because healing doesn't happen in isolation. And this too is part of the path.